Okay, so how about we get to our speaker? Andrew Boardman's background started at a very early age. At 17 at Carnegie Mellon University, developing genetic algorithms for groundbreaking programmatic stock trading. Interesting. What is the average length of time a stock is held these days?
It depends on who you're talking about. So hedge funds can hold them for fractions of a second.
Wow.
A long trade, it's a weird world, because when I was looking at IPOs in particular, they said, well, we need you to hold on to the stock for a long time. And we said, oh, well, that's interesting. How many years is that? And they said, oh, no, like a month.
That's forever.
It's really long for this kind of scenario. Like, a month is long-term holding? Wow, okay, this is a different world. They have like, it depends. If you're talking about specifically hedge funds, you can be talking like get in the morning, get out by the end of day, and that is the entire time that you're supposed to hold it. Other people, like Warren Buffett, long term is like 30, 40 years. So it really depends on which particular style of investing you're talking about.
Got it. Andrew graduated from Colorado State University, beautiful area, with a double major, computer science and economics. Great combination. You see the software and trading. Worked at a publishing company, Quark, in Denver. Co-founded a consulting company, Winborn. Then went to Microsoft and worked on Office and Windows Live products and Windows. If anybody has any questions on booting up, here's our guy. I've got some questions. He also co-founded another startup called Talent Spring for a recruiting company using graph theory, and that's where he got most of his lessons learned. So hopefully we'll get some of those lessons. Andrew then consulted in Seattle startups, and that led to the co-founding of startup number 3, which was Learn VC, and that's, I think, what we're here to hear mostly about, his experience with that and some of those lessons learned applied to our companies. Andrew's skills include competitive analysis, software and systems architecture, manager mentoring, product and project management. What doesn't this guy do? Due diligence for financial deals, term sheet evaluation, and software development. Please help us welcome Andrew.
Okay, let's switch over to the other presentation here and get this going. So, I am not a subject matter expert in the vehicle stuff, but I think that I'll have an interesting twist on it that is more from the both the financing side as well as the decisions that you make along the way when you're doing one of these startups. And in particular, I wanted to do a case study talking about Tesla versus Fisker and then the newcomer Comma.ai. And they are not, I would say Tesla and Fisker are very similar in many ways. Comma is very different, and it's that contrast that I want to talk a lot about. So, first of all, when you hear the word hacker, what do you think? What would you say a hacker is? Anyone?
Someone who does things differently.
Someone who does things differently. I like that one. What is a classic hacker? I mean, if you think about what they
Somebody who breaks into stuff without breaking into.
Yeah, someone who breaks into stuff that probably they're not supposed to break into.
Penetrating places they're not supposed to.
Or, yeah. So,
Somebody who's curious.
somebody who's curious, I like that one a lot. That kind of segues nicely into this slide, which is the best quote that I've found about the hacker mentality. And this is what I'm really the core of what I want to get across here is when you think about a hacker mentality, you think about somebody who wants to understand a system at a fundamentally deeper level than other people, usually so they can do something novel and interesting with it that other people aren't able to do. So classically, if you are familiar with the phone phreaking stuff that happened in like the 70s, 80s, they figured out how the telecom agencies were signaling how to dial and how to complete calls, and then they faked it, and then it worked, and suddenly they were able to make free long-distance calls. So they did a bunch of investigation, tried to figure out how this system actually worked, and then once they understood it, they did something novel and interesting with it. Something not legal, something not necessarily ethical, but something that they couldn't have done just trying to play with a phone. They actually had to understand how the whole system worked. So this is a hacker. This is what a hacker looks like. This is Hacker Classic. His name is, or his hacker alias is GeoHot. This is George Hot. And the reason that I say he is a classic hacker is because this is what he did. He figured out something novel about a system and then was able to do things with it that nobody else could. So here's a bunch of stuff, right? He was the first one to jailbreak an iPhone. And so he figured out how Apple implemented this without the source code. And then he figured out a novel way to take advantage of the mistake that they made and allow people to put their own software on this. He also was pretty instrumental in a PlayStation 3 hack. He didn't do the entire hack, but it was his work that figured out where the encryption keys were on the system. So they were able to basically go in there, figure out where that was, and then once you have those encryption keys, you can do a lot of other things with it.
How old was George when he hacked the iPhone?
17.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's 17. He's still quite young. That was a while ago because that was the original iPhone.
When you say young, is that by normal U.S. standards or Silicon Valley standards? If you're over 13, I think then you're old.
I think he's like mid-20s now. So, you know, he's fairly standard for Silicon Valley at this point.
Middle age.
But he's also a CEO because he founded a company called Comma.ai. And the idea behind Comma.ai, as far as I can tell, was basically he looked around and he said, everybody's working on this autonomous vehicle stuff, autonomous driving, and nobody's actually delivering. They're making promise after promise after promise. And if you think about a hacker ethos, the idea of promising and not delivering is the antithesis of a true hacker ethos, right? They want to stay quiet, do something incredible, and then put it out there and have people go, I can't believe that you actually did this thing, rather than, you're not going to believe this thing that we're going to do, and then never actually make it happen. Let's talk about a different hacker. And this is not a traditional hacker, but I think that you guys might recognize him. Elon Musk, wrong photo. There we go. Elon Musk. They might notice who that guy is. I figured this would work well in this group. Elon Musk is not a traditional hacker. He's not somebody who sat poring over, well, he did, but we'll say that he's not the kind of person who broke the iPhone or did any of those kinds of things. He is extremely technical, he's extremely smart, but what I would call him is a hacker CEO. He's got the same hacker mentality, but he's applying it to business instead of technical. He does know what he's talking about technically, but I think his real innovations are figuring out the competitive landscape and using a hacker mentality to figure out the right approach to those business landscapes, as opposed to just hacking something technically and then figuring out what's going on there. We all know about Elon Musk. So he made his fortune the first time with something called Zip2. Never had to work again, could have bought a Caribbean island and retired forever. Instead, he plowed that money into PayPal, what eventually became PayPal, made a huge fortune off of that, could have seriously retired and bought a much nicer island, took all that money, and then plowed it back into his passions as he was making these companies. So SpaceX was the big one. He also was an early investor in Tesla and an early investor in Solar City. And then Tesla had some issues, and he ended up taking over, and now he's the CEO of that as well. And then Tesla bought Solar City, and so those are now mixed up. And then there's the Hyperloop stuff that he's working on. So it is hard to overstate how close Tesla came to going bankrupt or not being a going concern multiple times. And we're going to talk a lot about why that survived versus other things. But I now want to contrast the hacker mentality with the opposite. What would you say the opposite to a hacker mentality is?
Normal person.
What's that?
A normal person.
Normal person.
A corporate mentality.
A corporate mentality. I like that. That actually feeds well into what I'm thinking here. Has anybody heard the term script kiddie? So
Pretending to be a hacker.
Pretending to be a hacker. That's exactly right. So the idea behind a script kiddie is there are a bunch of hacking tools that are out there. There are a bunch of literal scripts that you could run that will do port scanning, or they'll look for different vulnerabilities, and some of them are sophisticated enough to actually try to take advantage of those vulnerabilities as they find them. And people who know how to use these scripts, kind of, but they don't really understand what they're doing, they don't understand why they work, and they don't understand the possible repercussions of that, that's what they call a script kiddie. And in the security industry, this is a derogatory term. Calling somebody a script kiddie is to say you have no actual skill or knowledge. You just have a bunch of tools that you're willing to throw at things. So the more immature, but unfortunately often just as dangerous exploiter of security lapses on the internet is a script kiddie. The typical script kiddie uses existing and frequently well-known and easy-to-find techniques and programs or scripts to search and exploit weaknesses and other computers on the internet, often randomly and with little regard or perhaps even understanding to potential harm. So if somebody is just kind of flailing around with a few tools, not really understanding how they work, and hoping for the best, that is a very script kiddie kind of approach. And I would say that this is very similar to cargo cults. Who knows the term cargo cults? Not very many people. Okay. So there is the anthropological concept of cargo cults, which is actually very sophisticated, very interesting. I highly recommend you do a bunch of research into it because it's way deeper than what I'm going to talk about here. But I want to talk about the easy version of it, the version that we can discuss right now, which is you see something being successful, and you see a bunch of stuff around that success. So in this case, this was World War II era, Southeast Asian island nations, a bunch of relatively primitive tribes who have not had much exposure to the West or other more advanced civilizations. And all of a sudden, their islands are being used during World War II as staging areas for bombing campaigns and so on. So a bunch of people came and they built a landing field and a control tower, and they ran operations, and cargo planes would come in and bring supplies. And the mistaken logic is thinking that the reason that the cargo planes came and dropped off the cargo was because you had this landing strip and this control tower, and all you had to do was create another landing strip and control tower, and the cargo would come. So there were actual religious cults that were building these things. So they would build wooden airplanes, wooden control towers out of bamboo and other things. They would make these, goggles or earphones out of primitive materials, thinking that this is how you summon the cargo. Okay. So that concept, Richard Feynman, the wonderful physicist, gave a commencement speech where he really talked about like cargo cult science, like the trappings of science, but not actually the understanding of what's going on. So this takes us to another entrepreneur. Henrik Fisker, I'm sure many of you know much better than I do about all of this stuff, but the core is he is an amazing automotive designer. I mean, he makes beautiful cars. That does not make him a CEO. And I think my argument is that he is not a CEO, but what he did was what a lot of people in Silicon Valley and other places do when they decide to make a company. They do cargo cult business. They do cargo cult company, which is what are the trappings of success? And I will start bringing those in. I will have a very nice office. I will have this. I will hire these people, and not fundamentally understanding their business. So one of the big differences between Tesla and Fisker Automotive was a very technological decision of, do you start with a hybrid or do you start with a pure electric vehicle play? A hybrid seemed like the less risky approach. Is that fair? Does that make sense to everybody? Like,
Well, Toyota was successful with it.
yeah, I mean, there have been successes with it. So he said, hey, a high-end hybrid is surely the right approach to this. And Tesla went the much harder route and went pure electrical. And why did one succeed and the other fail? Their funding history looks really similar. Like they got the same Department of Energy loans at about the same amount. I think Fisker got about 100 million more, but it was within the same range of 400 to 500 million. And the big difference between them was fundamental understanding of the business. So they saw different opportunities. Fisker Automotive seemed to see the need for high-end, luxury, hybrid type of automotives. And Tesla went with a different direction. Now, why did Tesla go the other direction? Who knows the motivation that Elon Musk had for even founding SpaceX and investing in Tesla? Is anybody familiar with what he was doing there? Yeah.
But I've heard that his ultimate goal is to go to Mars, and he needs batteries, and he needs solar panels, and he needs rockets.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So from every interview that I've seen with him and every write-up that I've seen, his basic thesis was, we have existential dread around the future of humanity, and therefore we need technologies and we need to make these types of progress that will get us off of the planet so that humanity itself is more likely to survive. So we need to stop polluting everything, hence Solar City and Tesla, and we need to get off the planet and start exploring the solar system and farther and actually putting humans on other worlds, which means SpaceX. So when Elon Musk was making his decisions about whether or not to do something like a hybrid versus a pure electrical vehicle, for him it was clear, because his goal was not just to make a successful company, it was to fundamentally change the behaviors and the technologies that people used on a day-to-day basis. Fisker was creating a much more gorgeous high-end hybrid. It's a very fundamental difference in type of approach that you take and the decisions that you make.
They were beautiful.
They were gorgeous.
I got to sit in one at Concourse Daily Events a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I just watched a video right before I came here of somebody doing a test drive of a Fisker, and it is a gorgeous vehicle. There is no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, why do you care? Because it's a hybrid. And it had some other issues as well, but it's a hybrid, right? So,
Quick comment. I mean, I just find that fascinating, your story, the difference between Elon Musk and Fisker, that Fisker was just looking to build a car. I mean, his vision was very tactical.
Yes.
And Elon's was like, I mean, that's generations. This is looking ahead 100 years.
yeah, it's a massive difference. And I think that, when people talk about you should do something because you're passionate about it, you can't be passionate about everything. And the other thing I would say is that if you have a hobby that you're really passionate about and you turn it into a full-time job, then it becomes a job, and sometimes you need your new hobby in order to take that thing. But the real core of being passionate about something is that it will help sustain you through the really hard times. And both Fisker Automotive and Tesla had really hard times. One thing that let's back up for a second. Let's talk about one thing about cargo cults. So I want to see, is there a cargo cult belief around startups that you can tell me about that isn't really sustained by evidence, but is deeply held by lots of people in the industry? Do you know any of those? I would argue there are many.
I didn't understand the question.
Okay, so is there a belief that people have about how to run startups, especially in the Silicon Valley area, that if you look at like actual research is not true?
A lot of people just rent a co-working space, they bootstrap things, and they hire young people. They follow the MO of being successful. And I don't know, do they do the market research? Is there really a need for it?
That happens a lot. One of the things that I would that you touched on there that I think is very true is the young people part. So there is a core belief in Silicon Valley that you hire a bunch of young, usually white male software engineers, right? And you throw them at a problem and they work their butts off and they don't have a social life and they don't do anything else, and then you'll be successful. And that doesn't work.
College dropouts.
Right? The college dropout is another really great one. Yeah, like somehow being a dropout of a great university makes you even more valuable than having stuck there and graduated. And what happens often is it's the exceptions, like the Mark Zuckerbergs, that then try to inform the mainstream. And most of the time, the people with more experience are better at things. Not always, but most of the time. And so if you have a cargo cult belief that if you hire a bunch of young, unexperienced people and throw them hard problems, things will work out, sometimes it won't work. The other one that I wanted to talk about was the long hours. So who here has seen a startup where you're supposed to work like 80 or more hours a week, not have weekends, and somehow that's going to make you more successful? That's one of the big ones in the Silicon Valley area. And if you look at any research on how that actually works, it destroys your productivity. You end up making so many mistakes doing those long hours that you get yourself into what a lot of people call technical debt. Things are in such horrible shape that it's going to take you even longer to recover from it than it cost you to get there in the first place. But the thing about cargo cults is that you still can't say for certain that this thing that you've decided is a cargo cult belief is never okay. So the long hours is the one I want to talk about, because there was, and there have been a few times at Tesla, where they did pull these long hours for long periods of time. And in some cases, that was the absolute right thing to do. So in particular, they were getting ready for a meeting with Daimler, and they wanted to show the work that they were doing on their powertrain and the battery packs and all the work that they were doing on the engines. And they didn't really have a good platform for it, and they didn't have a good platform that would show that they're a good partner with Daimler. So what they did is they went to Mexico to buy a smart car because they couldn't find one in the States. They imported it up, they stripped everything out, they put their own powertrain and everything in it, rebuilt it so it looked like it was untouched. And then when they had the Daimler engineers in later, they gave them test drives. And at this point, it was by far the fastest smart car on the planet, because it was pure electric and in this tiny little light package that just zoomed. And apparently, not one of the German engineers could finish their test drive and get out of the car without just this huge smile on their face, like, that was the coolest thing that I've ever done. And that was long hours, weekends, over the holiday season, and it saved the company. If they hadn't done it, they wouldn't have gotten the contract, they wouldn't have gotten a Series E, I believe, financing from Daimler, and it literally saved the company. So my point is not that something like long hours is always bad. My point is that you have to understand the trade-offs. You have to be realistic and say, okay, this is going to cost us productivity, but we need to get this done in a shorter period of time because of this business need. It's weighing those around. All right, so George Hotz, he created this thing called Comma.ai, and they started doing a bunch of neural learning stuff where at first you would download an app and you would mount your phone to the front of your dashboard so that it could take video out the front, and then it would record you driving. So you would drive along your normal thing, and it would record you driving. And what it basically did was it took the video and it took what you were doing and figured out how to drive well based on your actual driving. And so they were building up this database of tons and tons of data to try to figure out how to use machine learning in order to automate not a pure automatic driving solution, but more like a better assisted one. So you still had to be there, you still had to be paying attention, but you could mostly keep your hands off of the steering wheel and the brake and the gas. And as they were working on this and getting ready to ship it at the end of last year, there was going to be sub $1,000 device that you hooked up to certain Acuras, or certain Acuras and Hondas. They got this letter from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration saying, we understand that you're trying to do this device that's a transportation device which we regulate, so you need to be talking to us about the safety impact of this, especially the safety impact of making it hackable by other people, making it changeable by people after you've sold it to them. Also, if you don't respond to this, we're going to fine you like $60,000 a day until you do it. And at the time, he was in China, and he said, I would rather spend my life building amazing tech than dealing with regulators and lawyers. It isn't worth it. So he just canceled the product that day. Now, at the time, I'll be honest, it seemed, I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and it seemed very similar to me to some experiences that I've had with my young children, where it just said, oh yeah, well, no, threw it away. Now that I've done more research on it, I think it was probably the right call for them. What they've done instead is they've open sourced it, and they're trying to make it something that people can play around with, and they will become the technological provider for it, and then they will work with other third parties to create actual products, and then they won't create the product, they will create the platform enabling technology that the other people will use. But again, this is a very different approach. So here I would say GeoHot is an amazing hacker. He's an amazing technologist. But what he isn't yet, maybe he will grow into it, is he isn't an amazing hacker CEO like Elon Musk. And that's one of the main differences. Now, Comma.ai got, I think, $3 million in a Series A from Andreessen Horowitz. And I'm curious to see what happens next, because with that kind of pivot, unless they figure out a novel way of really going after a large market, I don't see that they're investable at this point. That's just my experience with this sort of thing. But I think it's a very interesting approach, and I don't know if he had a lot of choices. But the reason I don't think he had a lot of choices is because he doesn't seem to see this coming. And if you're doing something in the transportation area, you really need to understand how that's going to work. Like, how are you going to interface with the regulators, because it's a regulated industry. So what I would like to do now is open it up to questions, and in particular we can talk about funding related things. I wanted to give a little bit of compare and contrast with the funding models of these two. The big difference between Tesla and Fisker is really, I believe that Tesla, way before they got money, they understood exactly what they needed to do, how they needed to spend it in order to be successful. And Fisker was a lot more reactive. They got like the DOE money, and then they seemed to flail around for ways of actually spending it. And that DOE money was given in tranches, and tranches are chunks of the money where you have to meet certain milestones in order to unlock the rest of it. And in the VC industry, that's very standard. Like, they'll say, I'm gonna invest $5 million in you, but I'm going to do it in $2.5 million tranches, and I would give you $2.5 million, and then you have to meet these milestones, and then I'll give you the other $2.5 million. The interesting thing about the DOE loan money was that they didn't even do that. Like, you had to basically spend the money up front, prove that you spent it on the right stuff and that you met the milestones, and then they would write you the check. So it was a much riskier proposition. It wasn't nearly the handout that a lot of the press gave it out to be. Any questions or things that you want to talk about related to this?
Yeah, I look at your explanation of comment.ai, and to me, would it be a fair comparison to say they're like an ARM manufacturer? They provide the platform, the design, even though it's going to be more open source. And then you've got a user community that uses it. And it's the user community that takes that architecture and builds on it.
Yeah. I would say it's very similar to kind of the Android model. So the original Android model of we're building this open source platform that everybody can build on top of versus the closed proprietary system. And really, for autonomous driving, I would say the two major players are Tesla with the closed proprietary system and Comma.ai with the open platform, open source. Of the two, clearly Tesla is the more mature at this point. I think that Comma has some interesting results, but they're still fairly early on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to give you a different perspective about different
Wonderful.
and Tesla. That back in early 2001 too, you know the EV1.
Yes.
EV1, yeah.
Yes.
I think that time you just mentioned earlier that Elon Musk is not a founder.
No, he's not the founder of Tesla.
So that time and by the way, I disagree the fact that he has the hacker mentality. You correctly say the hacker do very quiet on the stable, and then they make the whole world recognize it, and then they disappear, right? Elon Musk is the opposite.
Yeah.
He's a marketeer. He make announcement way ahead of time. Even today, everybody knows that whenever Tesla say delivering the Model 3, you give them another year. When Model X, you give another year. So it is a pattern of a maverick entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
He has to please the investor by prematurely announce I have a product when you actually don't have it. Okay? Let me tell you, I was at that time because our institute helped to train electric car technicians for Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a Porsche, and we remove the engine, and we put the electric car in, electric motor in, and we run. Right? So the early version of Tesla, the founder is Martin, I forget his last name. He was the founder.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually he had a very good idea. What they do is that they actually use the body of Lotus.
The Lotus. The model.
When you do the body of Lotus and you put the electric motor in and you lithium battery in and you have a car. Actually the car very fast.
Yeah.
Even you do by hand, 2-3 of us can build a car and the car run faster than the electric car.
Yeah.
So the first impression, anybody sees the electric car, you will amazed of the torque. It's tremendous torque. It gives you a very sense of exhilarating.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so, and I agree with you, when Daimler and Mercedes-Benz come and drive the Tesla car, they will soon impressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I give credit to Mr. Elon Musk, he's a genius for sure, right? But I think being an entrepreneur, nobody know what next. And at that time, back 2003 and 4, they ran out of money. He put $100+ million by himself.
Yes.
And the company ran out of money, right?
Right.
So at that time, nobody know what was the future. He never thought about go to Mars, anything. At that time, nobody know about it at all, right?
Yeah.
But I think one thing that a lot of people don't know, that same Tesla is that, and this is not a lot of people don't know about, is that the California area as a whole have the regulations. If you make a hybrid car, electric car, you earn a lot of money for that. Even though you couldn't sell an electric car. So when Mr. Fisker, he came from a big corporation.
Yeah.
His mentality is that before I come in, I have to have 5 level VP.
Yes.
I have 5 director of my manufacturing. I become a big shop.
Yeah.
He had to build big organization before he gets both.
Right.
Mr. Elon Musk is a maverick because when you work for software, like you don't need a lot of VP. You need a few good programmer, make it happen, right?
Right.
So he more or less a maverick. He can start the company with less cost than Fisker. On the other hand, when we run out of money, the government bail him out not because of grant, because if you make 500 Tesla car, even though before people sell your car, GM declared to give you 3,000 each car. Back in early 2010, Tesla earned $250 million, $250 million from the zero emission credit. The law California like this, 10% of all gasoline cars, you have to have electric zero emission.
Right.
If you do not do that, then you have to pay for the guy in town who have And Tesla was the only game in town.
Right.
So Tesla earned a lot of money at that time, and nobody knows that. Recently, actually Arizona board have a hearing. They want to phase out the plan. But Tesla was the only one in town that protest because they last year they earned about $125 million by doing nothing, just earn the credit. The
Mike,
fact
that's
that-
an excellent point. I mean, your
Yeah,
your
that's
analysis
the
is just
company.
the corporate structure. I think it's fascinating, right? When you talk about Fisker, he was doing the cargo cult. I mean, just what Andrew was talking about. I'm going to pattern what I had from the old big corporations. This is how they were successful.
Right.
So you went from the top down, maybe, rather than Musk going from the ground up. Would
Well,
that be fair?
one of the interesting things, I mean, you mentioned that he funded the company for a long time. And in fact, in at least one of his interviews, he talks about how he didn't want to take other people's money because he was pretty sure that he was going to lose it all. And he didn't want to put his friend's money at risk in something that he thought was probably a losing bet. But he had this passion about, this is where we need to go, so I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make it happen.
I remember his quotation, even today I remember that he said that start up a business is like eating glass, broken glass. He said that.
Yeah.
And I'm involved myself. You know, the fact that the young company have to spend day and night working, not because they want to be 10, because you don't have enough staff. A founder, team, or company do 2 or 3 jobs.
Oh yeah.
That's
yeah.
why you cannot go, many government employees, they work, start 7 o'clock, they go home at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
We start 7 o'clock, we go home at 10 o'clock. Not because we want to stay late.
Yeah.
Our family wait for me, but there's nobody there doing us.
Yeah.
That's what I said, you like eat glass. I think it's so true when they don't have enough money doing that.
Thanks, Lloyd. You got a lot of good insight. Any other questions before we break, people? Maybe some ice cream? Do you have ice cream here?
Have a sweet tea.
Yeah, sweets. I will. Okay. Well, let's give a big round to Andrew. And because he doesn't own a Tesla yet, but he wants to, here's the hat at least. So you can be a script kiddie for Tesla.
Awesome. It's the same as success.
Okay. Thanks for coming, guys.